Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, there it is. All right, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like thinking about, thinking about 1972 and 72 being alphabets of, 1972 referring to some idea of like a Kobe ID 19 as the alphabets are like 72 and money. And it seemed to be that really, really what I've been thinking about here recently. It's like that EltonJohn song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Um, Several factors about the Marmalade sky. It's kind of like I was thinking about that. And it's kind of like wondering, I was trying to actually remember, which came first, the Marmalade Sky or Elton John song, Lucy in the Sky. I'm actually trying to remember. Um, I haven't really tried to look to find out about the information, but that one weekend is kind of like I think it was like on a Sunday back in 1972 that I was like, the sky was like so orange. And it's kind of like here recently, I've been kind of like thinking about, what were the actual conditions of the atmosphere that would maybe present maybe a mandatory requirement to actually accomplish that, and maybe something about Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, or think about NASA and Air Force and we international as far as like certain factors of the weather, the WA of weather and the WEA International. Okay, and there had been some reference to like Make America Great Again based upon some reference um, in that way. So like I was kind of like thinking about that because um, it seemed to be that color code of the orange. It presents the county, yet it presents the Coast Guard, and what's all where it's at. Federal, state, local authorities, as well as certain factors it would be presented as maybe the thought of maybe martial law. And it's kind of like thinking if that was like the sky was actually like about something about maybe a mandatory requirement that would be considered maybe the thought of maybe television being used as a deed restriction, um, or define the meaning of what lifespan and de facto is, having fair use of what would be considered. I mean, if it's the thought of intellectual as compared to carbon footprints, absentee voting, or mechanics lien, having some idea of like a trading energy as a North American Free Trade Act. Um, I don't know if combining the thought of like North Atlantic Treaty Treaties Organization um, is exactly the thing to do, but at the same time, I've seen reference as NATO being the North Atlantic Treaties Organization, but I've seen it with the P and without the P, North Atlantic Peace Treaties Organization. North Atlantic, North American Free Trade Act is like NAFTA. Um, without the F, it's like NATO. And the difference between a P and an F, I mean, it's just like, um, it's kind of like almost like a Hurley. And it's like Under Armour, symbolic representation at a 90 degree, like Hurley's, I believe, is at like a 90 degree of what will present the issue between NAFTA and NATO with the P. The difference between the P and the F would only be like a C, and like a flip of 180 being asymmetrical, kind of like Pentagon Reserve Reverse Intelligence and Opposite, about it being like a capital letter or human capital in a way of like the F. The only difference between the F and those two factors of like the symbolic representation of like the emblem of like Under Armour, yet at a 90 degree, it's like Hurley, if I'm not mistaken, um, making the thing about placement would be almost like the presentation of a degree or exponential placement that is normally defined as powers involving like exponents um, as a degree. The degree is not always identifying exponential value, but normally implies the degree itself, in that way. But and that's the thing about sometimes the weather that way. But it's kind of like thinking about the atmosphere and that one particular weekend. I'd come home from school on Fridays back in 1972, and I'm not sure what grade I was in at the time. Um, hmm. Yeah, but anyway, I was like in school anyway. But I got home from school, and it's like I don't know what I was doing in my brother's room, but I don't think it was there. But I fell asleep in his room. Okay, and it was around like 4, maybe 5 p.m., and I woke up and thinking that it was going to be like only 2, maybe 3 hours later the same day. When in fact the whole weekend had virtually passed by, and I woke up probably around maybe 5 or 6, maybe 7 p.m. like on a Sunday, and it was like the sky was like orange. It was like unreal orange. And the thing about experiencing something going through the Stargate program, or the initials of a Stargate or a surgeon general, based upon the humerus bone and being like air raids going on and all kinds of stuff, and realized that it had been operated on. And I'm thinking that the thing about certain factors about lasers not showing or presenting any scars. The thing with it is that while going through there was like quite a bit going on, and I noticed that only because I was like having to lean from side to side, and it didn't like consciously register. I mean, like immediately. It's like I noticed it, but it's just like it didn't quite, kind of make the conscious level like like what's going on. But I didn't even realize that it had been operated on, and like 4 inches like my humerus bone had been like removed going through the Stargate program. Not that it was even identified as that. I mean, like at all. The thing with this is that when after certain factors had taken place, and the memory of like certain factors had led to the Spore Stone in World News presenting the Spore Stone used in orthopedic surgery, that it got to the point of um, the humerus bone, and even not even consciously realizing certain factors, even knowing what I'm talking about, like right now, um, it being the thought of maybe, um, the humerus bone being some idea of like the humor, but it's really not ridiculous, but sometimes the humor, the word is so relation at degree level, okay, between architecture, platform, and embedding encryption, of like programming and language, of HTTP, and the binary number thing about programming. Um, and so much in like linguistic alphanumeric, sometimes humor, I mean, just so leads to, I mean, the degreed answer. And it's normally involved in relation. It's so true, but it's not always that all the time. But the thing with this is that, okay, all that had taken place, and knowing the intensity of like, when I was like going through the circuit, World News was talking about the gas. It's odorless, it's senseless. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. And I was at a location going through the circuit, okay, and it took place, and I didn't even have like a hint or a clue, or even feel for a brief moment, a split second of any losing consciousness. I mean that wasn't it. I mean at all. I mean, wasn't any kind of warning. And I mean, the next thing I knew is like on the ground, okay. Probably maybe 2 or 3 minutes might have passed by before I'd even realized, and I opened up my eyes. Okay, it's kind of like, how did I even get on the floor? I mean, I don't even remember like falling off the toilet or anything. I'm just like waking up on the floor, like, what am I doing on the floor, And I'd remember that World News had been talking about that, and it actually took place. And I didn't even have the connectivity of them talking about it or even realizing it at the time. But anyway, this is like, it goes back to like the Marmalade Sky. I was kind of like wondering if that one song that EltonJohn is singing about the Marmalade Sky, it's kind of like certain factors in that song. Um, it's almost like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It's almost like the Hyundai Excel, the Chevrolet Geo Prism, and the Hyundai Excel. And I don't know how many people may have heard, to excel above the rest, like a Nuit Comptus over the pyramid, and the eye over the pyramid. But it seems, that Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is kind of, I mean, really that, with the Chevrolet Geo Prism, the prism presenting the colors of a diamond and a rainbow, measured in nano units of like night vision. I mean, even during the daytime, I mean, it's not always the thing about night vision, but measuring what is normally really the luminous at nano unit, as compared to like regular luminous that would be considered maybe not a nano unit of measuring like light. Um, in any case, so like that seemed to be the thing that I was kind of like seeing some information in the Secret of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs a country, involving De Beers diamonds, okay? And the Keystone Pipeline, identified as the Alaskan Pipeline from Alaska all the way to Houston here. I'm in Pearland, okay? This is the year January of 2026, okay? And the thing about the Keystone Barrier, anything Keystone Pipeline, okay, but I mean, in pronunciation, I mean, I'm sure that most people that's ever drank like Keystone beer or Coors Light knows that it's, I mean, really virtually the same, just different cans. Um, I mean, for real, okay, but it presents like Keystone at like a midnight blue color with like the Keystone Light, okay, the can, okay. Um, Yet the Keystone it presents that like the Spore Stone and where that happens of like Surgeon General's and Stargate program. And it represents like two pipelines being like, many factors, even like, two sides of the arm of this, the human anatomy, skeletal structure involving, in my case, the humerus bone. Um, and actually where that took place is going through a circuit and, the keystone about it. And it's kind of like I was even thinking about, like Kenneth Hagee, because I've seen Kenneth Hagee's name as, um, oh God, I think John Hagee. It's almost like the thing about like Wilkes Barre, Pennsylvania, suggesting maybe something like Abraham Lincoln on a balcony, but really it's really presenting factors of like GMC raising a bar like a baptism, okay? Um, at that location, the thing is that, it's kind of like thinking about Cornerstone in San Antonio. There's like factors in my mind about, San Antonio and the Alamo, uh, and Santa Ana and San Antonio being an SA. And the thing about, South America and certain factors of Latin terminology in that book, Secret of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, and then find factors of like the New York Federal Reserve Bank during the Ronald Reagan administration and Paul Volcker being called by Ronald Reagan to go to Washington, D.C. and presenting like two positions as once again, a Secretary of Treasury and like economics advisor. And the thing with this is that Robert E. Rubin, I mean, it's like all that, okay, but it seemed to be that the name of like it's on like what would be normally paper or even a direct deposit electronically. Robert E. Rubin is like the current event and current affair of the Secretary of Treasury that presents, I mean, every single person in the bank. It presents it like as, where's the human capital in your life? It presents like the factors of lifespan that most people might not recognize. The significant difference between the U.S. dollar's history or an executive is like, some idea of like a scribe. Even the name Robert E. Rubin, spelt in the King James Version like Reubin, like one of the tribes of Israel being like the tribe of Reuben, a tribe of scribes, okay? The thing about it is, okay, is that, the 12 tribes of Israel is like 144,000, yet a corporation is, the thing about, 144. And the only difference is it's three placements of the zeros, okay? And the thing with it is, okay, is that ultimately, that it presents all the connectivity of Keystone going through what seemed to be a Stargate program. And what the deal is about having a right to assemble or, a demanded, thought of participation or even knowing the difference or taking advantage and, and making the best of it, going through it. And really, that seems to be really the thing to do anyway. In any case, so like that Marmalade sky is somewhere in my mind. It seemed to be whether or not if it's really some idea of the sky, one of the bright, the only and one and only brightest like sky of like the orange back in 1972, and it's like on Sunday if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not even sure if that's like the thing about Bono, the lead singer for U2, in the name of love, um, and it's like he's almost singing about the thing about martial law and certain factors of the Stargate program that lead to pro bono and like something that would be similar of like civil liberties union, yet the freedoms, what would it be like the thought of maybe benefits of like supplemental security income, as benefits is a type of annuity. Yet, the 1040 EC form, like once again, it presents like a percentage of an annual and the similarity of amount or, I mean, extremely close between the 1040 EC form with like a prepaid tax that's normally a lot of times totally and completely refunded the whole amount based upon the amount of an annual. Um, normally a calendar year of the forms. Okay, not necessarily a fiscal annual as a date of a point of origin as a beginning date at specific time, or even a grand opening of a business, or whatever the case may be. But in any case, it's kind of like I was thinking about that, because I was kind of like thinking about what is the real deal about international financial management, uh, using some idea of like a deed restriction of television program as LifeSpan, or the thought of like Ulysses S. Grant having like a presidential debate. I mean, just using another president's name, Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, presents. I mean, just his name, like a student loan combined with a Pell Grant, or foster grant adoption, as some idea of relation as a student loan combined with a Pell Grant, or some idea of like monopolizing capitalization, and as presented as I don't want to necessarily say Al-Anon all the time about some idea of the ship channel, or liquidable equity as maritime law as a ship channel, as K television in the Houston area. Um, the thing with it is that really, I mean, if that's all getting to the thought of using um, a deed restriction as lifespan of de facto, only based upon a carbon footprint and abstain voting of a vice president network, um, and vice being the thing about immigration custom enforcement, yet international financial management presenting the reality about SAN software, that actually is like used with like international financial management, and it's the acronym that's in my mind, the Securities and Annuities Network, as well as the Storage Area Network. The thing with this is that it presents like the VPN as a vice president network, yet the acronym presents likewise a virtual personal network. And in my mind, that's automatically the thing about a carbon footprint, absentee voting, or a mechanics lien of like trading energy that would present the carbon footprint and absentee voting, um, as a North American Free Trade Act. So like, where's all the citizenship and birthrights? And during that time, and really what's going on, the thing with this is that I was kind of like thinking about that Marmalade sky, if that actually is like some kind of air mark. I kind of refer to like you know I thought maybe I'd be the executive of the entire century, just take it upon myself to say, hey, like build a 26,000 maximum seating capacity of like an Airmark Arena on Highway 288, an indoor arena, predominantly for like entertainment and other factors, involving like at the time it was like three like major Christian like record companies, manufacturing, distribution, sales, and all that about promotion, sales, and all that stuff about it. Yeah, so like I was thinking that about certain factors about one being like Transdev Horizon, and a manufacturing, a record manufacturing. I don't know if I choose company and corporation or both, but manufacturing, distribution, sales, promotions, and all that about concerts. Yet Transdev Horizon would see the perfect record company, plus and including like a yacht manufacturing. So I was kind of like starting to be the executive of the century, and like writing all that stuff to Washington D.C., going through the circuit about Transdev Horizon yacht manufacturing and distribution, like in Freeport, and the thought of like even Transdev Horizon aviation. My thing about more so of helicopter. Um, and right now, kind of like the thing about Trump saying "Make America Great Again," like the Great Britain's flag being red, white, and blue, like the United States, and the Hill HX 50. They're like red, white, and blue as well. And place I was taken to going through the Stargate program is the summit, and I don't remember seeing the Hill HX 50 there while I was there, but it was the Lexus LFSA and some other factors going on, and all these things were like going on while I was going through the Stargate program, and remembering things about it, it's like really intensive air raids, okay, and like I didn't even realize, or even really comprehend, not that it has to be a question. It's kind of like it never really was a question in my mind, other than just knowing it's going on, and that it happened while I was going to sleep, and I'm being taken all over different locations and places. Ultimately, it was really after 25 to 30 years, which is like progressively when I started in the beginning of like 2020, putting myself on YouTube.com on my channel at Wade ASV Pretty, at YouTube.com, with my lighting like you're seeing on me now, and in the background right behind me. Um, and that is the HD Colors Splendor of Color Kaleidoscope Fractal Animation, and that's like a live mural, but it's actually a DVD. Um, yeah, so like this one of the cooler ones. I was looking at some other ones on YouTube, but when I actually got to actually purchasing one, the availability really got the only choice in that one was it right there. Anyway, what you're looking at right now. Some that were showing on YouTube.com, the 3D animation was, so phenomenal. I don't think I could see any looping in any kind of way, although it looked like continual non-stop sequencing, and it looked like it never even repeated itself once. And I noticed it. I sit there, was like watching it on YouTube, and it was like available even to purchase. And I thought, great, all right, that's what I'm going to do. But when I actually got to it, when I was going to do it, it's like, where'd it go? It wasn't available anymore. So I started looking, and that's what was available right there, what you're seeing right now behind me on the silk screen right there in this tent. So that's the one I got, okay, and that is HD Color Splendor of Color, a kaleidoscope fractal animation DVD that's going through a projector right now. Those other lasers are like a separate individual lasers with like transparent different shapes and actually sequences of laser beams as compared to the 3D animation. Anyway, yeah, so like I kind of got off track there with all that. Yeah, so like anyway, that kind of like even got to the point of the Elton John song, Follow the Girl with Kaleidoscope Eyes, and all the information. The way it's just like available all at the same time, and realizing that certain factors it led to like even information, of the mailbox of current resident. And I find myself talking about a little bit more. Um, I wasn't even intending on really talking about anything, and I, it's like recording like on my drums with a lot of music that normally I practice as a drummer, just as a standard reference, for like a YouTube. Originally getting to, thought of maybe, getting the range that others might see that it's, simply and easily what they do anyway. And, my range of like what I normally do with normally progressive hard rock, but not limited to, including even, hard rock of like Christian rock and progressive, heavy metal rock and Christian contemporary. And yeah, so like, that was my thing about, putting myself on YouTube.com, and a lot of factors started taking place. But it led to, um, it's kind of like I'm having an Indus pledge allegiance, to furniture polish issue, and it's like it continually, like, led from room to room, and ultimately where I'm at like right now, and this has been going on really for 2.5 years, and a lot of, really not funny stuff that seem to be, the thing about like Mercedes-Benz introducing the smart for two car, ultimately the smart meter and center point energy seem to be the thing about the euro dollar and, center point energy, even the symbolic representation between the C and the PTIS on the backside of the US $1, and all that information about the Annuit Comptas, with the C, the alphanumeric value of like 58th in PTIS minus transfiguration, the one and only word in the book of Thessalonians about re-entering heaven. Okay. Well, anyway, so that's like, Annuit Comptas minus transfiguration is like 12, okay? Or, the thing about it being 87 in truth, alphanumerically with 12 being spelled out, yet at the same time, it's like region 1 and region 2. And, the pronunciation of the euro dollar is the euro, and the thing about the dollar, likewise being in addition, the US dollar as compared to the euro. And it's kind of like, I'm looking right at it, and I'm realizing something about, that halo left side with the E in between the C and the PTIS. But ultimately, I'm getting back to the Marmalade sky. Yeah. Yeah, so it seemed to be like something like in my mind that Marmalade Sky, it seemed to be like, if that's like, the entire Houston area, I'm kind of like wondering, if it was the entire United States as a Marmalade Sky, or if it's just Texas using the alphanumeric of 69 because of only one word, Jehovah, in the King James Version Bible. Yet Zion in the King James Version Bible is like an American word of 64 in American. And like movie and all kinds of like stuff about HTTP in Zion, okay? It's like the American word and it's like the American thing of like the Mormons really, and like Springdale, like Utah, and Zion National Park at Grover, Cleveland, of the 1,000 U.S. $1,000. Okay, so like it's kind of like wondering, what's the real deal about a vice president network? A bunch of uh, presidents, governors, and FBI, CIA, and it seems that even ASCAP, ASCAP, okay, it's like authors, composers, um, American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. And the thing with this is that ASCAP, it's almost like a fixed rate. Some businesses are thoroughly dependent upon only their profits and do not have a direct source, like a corporate, you know, uh, placement as a source of like not affected by supply and demand. The only thing about supply and demand is normally only the thought of maybe what a sole proprietor or a business that isn't having the direct source and is thoroughly dependent upon their profits, um, and don't have that direct consistency, like a service providing a geographical area, with a service of whatever meaning, value, employment has, not limited to employment. Well, anyway, so it's kind of like I was thinking about that because it kind of seemed to be whether or not the lifespan of de facto being used is like the idea of like where's the human capital. I mean, it's the only idea of state statutes annotated presenting only one word between warehousing and real estate. That word repudiation seems to be the thing involving limited to the black back of jurisprudence. Um, and the black book's been United States Constitution law and state statutes annotated. Vernon's Texas, Vernon's state of Texas state statutes annotated, and it's the only two that I could find that has any reality about jurisprudence with a black back, suggesting maybe the thought of prudential get a piece of the rock, um, or what the real deal is about the rectangle identifying like high-rise buildings, engraved with like granite. The lifespan more so than what you would think maybe of the cemetery. I'm talking about a huge rectangle identifying high-rise buildings. Think about huge corporations and franchises and all that stuff. And the rectangle on tennis court, normally on like 9-hole golf courses, that's somewhere during some 9-hole golf courses involvement, international financial management. That rectangle is automatically like Lincoln Continental. In my mind, it's automatically like the hood arm at the rectangle that identifies, international financial management. In any case, but it's kind of like thinking that if that song, like Elton John is presenting the Marmalade Sky. Likewise, in addition, it seemed to be that he's almost saying like about Chevrolet Geo Prism and De Beers Diamonds, and Hyundai excel above the rest with Lucy in the Skies with diamonds, and even the Marmalade Sky being the orange thing. And it's kind of like Austin Powers presents the flowers, and he's singing about the flowers, and that's the thing about Austin Powers. It's like that flower power. Yet, the Blue Bonnet Imperial Eagle, I mean, it's like the Blue Bonnet being, the state flower, the flower power, like of Austin Powers. Yet, almost like Trump saying fake news, it's like 84, like a wooden buffalo nickel would present the only word wooden presenting the idea of neighborhoods. A wooden buffalo nickel about coffee, a .com local area network, seemingly the thing about it. The thing with this is that, wooden with one D is like 76, and with two Ds it's like 80, and with like three Ds it's like 84, okay? And I'm sure that everyone should have seen 84 lumber, okay? 84 lumber, lumber being like 71 in Pearland, okay? Trump talking about fake news like it would be lumber or neighborhood or monetary domestic. I'm trying to place what distinguishes the difference would identify maybe something, if polarity is the issue, or just knowledge representing polarity. The thing about whether or not if international monetary funding as compared to monetary and domestic aggregates. I mean, that's really more so in my mind of neighborhoods, not necessarily the I-beams and concrete and steel and glass like of high-rise buildings or commercial venue of living quarters. And the only thing about, the 84 and the embassy being of neighborhoods would maybe be the only thought of maybe fake news, not really being a commercial venue of living quarter, might have the appearance as a a glass building, but not maybe a commercial venue of living quarters that presents the reality about not being affected by television programming or deed restriction in any kind of way based upon television programming itself. That's really really what I'm looking about having and getting as a commercial venue of living quarters, all about not limited to, but music video and audio production and concert touring and everything about it all, and doing some like recording and getting really into what I like do anyway. And it's been an economic factor of only what availability has really been presenting as what availability is, or even knowing what availability means and is available within the thought of what would be normally the thought of not necessarily a boundary and limitation beyond like a wide area network. It might present maybe economic factors based upon economic factors, or what would be required of during business hours, having the time to go beyond based upon description of position. So like anyway, so like thinking about that, because it seems that 1972 in that Marmalade Sky, and EltonJohn singing that Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is presenting that information like that Sunday. It's like Sunday, Bloody Sunday song by the lead singer Bono of the band U2 is really about the orange Marmalade Sky. Sunday, Bloody Sunday. And I'm thinking that very well may be the thing about 1972 is that Marmalade Sky, that one Sunday. I mean, the orange sky I can remember in my entire life to this day, from 1972 to this day, of January like 2026. And Bono is kind of like now with what's happened while I was going through a circuit and realizing that I'd been operated on, okay, is actually the issue of like 1972 and not even realizing if it's actually the thing about it happening in a neighborhood as compared to going through a circuit and not even realize a Stargate program involving like Wayne International as compared to maybe the thought of maybe just entertainment on television, the difference between a neighborhood and a circuit, or the thought of governmental structure as a storage area network, or international financial management, or a boycott and embargo through the whole entire situation. There seem to be the similarities of terminology in a boycott and embargo has similarities of a baptism. The thing about boycott and embargo of like import and exporting is the issue of clearance. Yet with like just transporting between city and county is really that as well, as a method of banking as between business and corporate law. Doesn't even have to be criminal law. At all. People might be led to believe, because of television programming, most people might think of what they know of litigation referring to settlement. Corporate law is so, about annuity is unreal, okay? Yet that one corporate term really is a corporate term. And very rarely do you hear corporations identify de facto involving a settlement. De facto seems to be the only issue, more so of General Motors, because it presents every easement, every factor of intellectual property based upon an easement being used. And that's the thing about even a driveway and a VIN number on a vehicle of any, or serial number of any transportation. Or even, some football players, they identify themselves as property of like Dallas Cowboys was like one of my first impressions of like property of the Dallas Cowboys, or property of like the Houston Oilers, or the property of like Tennessee Titans, As when I was realizing that I was like seeing that, in the beginning I didn't even think of that as intellectual property or international laws having fair use but not claiming ownership of the rights. I mean, human capital, or is it really the idea of degreed, non-degreed, non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, which is normally the thing about a lot of non-degreed participating factors that normally in a person's lifetime results in a lot of different places of employment, or not realizing that they're being used and that actually happening. Uh, Not realizing, something about, all that information and it happening and not ever having really it happening and being naive to the whole entire situation. It's kind of like thinking about, a lot of factors about degree, non-degree, and terminology that's sometimes identified as free and clear between a FHA and HUD. Um, it's like the non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization of the free and clear that's almost like in between a student loan, a defaulted student loan, that's like thrown into collection as a pool, yet represents almost like liquid equity of a ship channel, and all that happening actually, being factors that had been obviously my thought now, um, like Roe v. Wade. I mean, even in the classroom, and my name being Wade is kind of like, kind of like blind and naive to. I mean, really, obviously, it would seem to be the fact to me now, anyway. Um, in any case, so like, there's certain factors that would be, what seem to be the deal about like driver's education on like Pearland High School's campus. I mean, if it's really the ultimate getting to the idea of lifespan de facto being used going through a circuit Stargate program, I mean, and that being involving like de facto and General Motors being like about transportation and driver's education. I mean, like on the campus. I mean, you know, I don't know if it's true about every student on high school campuses, whether if the publisher's identified or not. But it seemed to be the only thing really about that fact that would only be the idea maybe of trading energy as a North American Free Trade Act, or mechanically in that way of like a carbon footprint and absentee voting. You've heard it all before. Um, my thing about what seemed to be the thing about center point energy in my mind, it just like seemed to be the halo left side. Only because like even Diners Club, and you've probably heard the due west of like navigation in the compass due west, and it's like Diners Club symbol was like a circle with like a straight line vertically right through it, and that is the first thought beyond the alphanumerics of 58. On that halo left side between the C and the PTIS is one vertical line. I mean, it's the very first thought being the alphanumerics of 59, and then realizing that a 90 degree in pi r squared and E equal mc squared in exponential quotients of powers of multiplication is all that right there, and it's like you can't even see it, but it's like Diners Club, the due west due 90, and it presents the quadrants, yet it presents the E of a 90 as like calculus, and the EE of like what would be it combined as like calculus. I mean, quantum, and I mean it presents all that there that way, and it's kind of like I'd realize certain factors about that, and the thing with this is that when it gets to like to 59, I stopped because of quantum. I mean, I got to that point, and I really even other than like realizing that Japanese has 22 alphabetical letters, and like the FDIC being like 22, or RCA, FBI minus RCA, or 22. The V, it seemed to be the thing about the 22 alphabetical letters in Japanese alphabet, and there was only two of them that I'd seen. I mean, I wasn't even looking for it, and I noticed that. Hey, that looks like Japanese. Actual structures of alphabetical letter in Japanese language alphabet of quantum structure, informative computation, using that different design E. And then this is parallel, okay, like 71 in like Japanese, okay. And I noticed that about front page in the same time period, like on front page of the Houston Chronicle News, even on world news, national news, and like local news. But kind of like really, I was like looking at it, and it wasn't just a duration on TV. It was like I was looking at it at the front page of the Houston Chronicle of that different design E. Yet, the big shipment port of Houston being like the Chevrolet Geo Prism and the Hyundai Excel. I mean, it seemed to be like Elton John singing about with Lucy in the Sky and the Diamonds. The De Beers diamonds in the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Fighters Over the Country, and the banner above like a new accomplice above the eye of the pyramid, and now it's the identical twin rainbows, and the thing about Mercedes Benz, going through okay, like Sugar Land's in Fort Bend County, okay? Mercedes-Benz is probably my preference anyway of Mercedes-Benz to go to anyway. And I went out there anyway to actually test drive a Smart for 2 car. And so I did, like, for many reasons, before I even really knew the real reason, okay? But I went out there anyway, okay? And it ultimately led to, Mercedes introducing the Smart for 2 car, ultimately the smart meter, like Centerpoint Energy. And it seemed to be the thing about the Eurodollar that way, of that one frequency, half cycle above and below, that you see like above the M in the name Pena. Yet it's all that information, but Fort Bend County is the Alpha Max of 200, okay? And the James Null unit, like in Fort Stockton, Texas, and the identical twin rainbow. I mean, it seemed to be the thing about Saturn Sky, okay? The Smart for 2 car, okay, in my mind, includes the Scion IQ, the highest possible score of 200, and the Saturn Sky, and the identical twin rainbow in Fort Stockton. It's a James Null unit, and the Alpha Max is 200. And the Ector County area, it's called a Tri-County in that area, and the Permian Basin. And it's almost like the Permian Basin is like almost like a birth certificate, or maybe a biblical scripture Jesus said he knew before, the foundations of the earth, like that being like a birth footprints on a birth certificate, or even in that area, like the Permian Basin. I mean, for real, even, what presents as like a plateau on one side, yet on another 180 degree on the exact opposite of an identical twin rainbow, yet all the information, it seemed to be linking like Qatar Airline, Boeing Airline, and Emirates Airline, and like in that area, including Cape Canaveral, of what was in the 80s of Pace concerts, and Cape Canaveral, in Florida on the Atlantic side, and Pace concerts and summit meetings here in Houston, and likewise in Geneva, bands like this seem to be involved. I mean, not limited to, summit meetings in Geneva, Switzerland, but seemingly, the summit in the Houston area, that was like a whole bunch of like rock concerts that I used to go to, back in the 80s, yet the Houston Rockets, and then it changed to the Compact Center, okay? But it seemed to be that Marmalade Sky is like I'm not sure if I should call it a martial law, but I'm kind of wondering, I mean, if that is only the thing about, the thought of a cloud has, I've heard it before, every cloud has a silver lining. And the only thing about the Marmalade Sky is that it's not the normal thought of it even being a cloud. But isn't it really? Is it like fog, or is it man-made, manufactured, tang in the sky, of astronauts and rockets? I'm kind of like trying to place. I mean, is it really the Marmalade Sky that's like the iconic, like, landmark? It's the air mark. I mean, is it martial law of a deed restriction using LifeSpan, LifeSpan as Defacto, based on television programming, or experiencing, thought of like importing and exporting as like a vice president network of carbon footprints, apathy voting, or Roe v. Wade. I mean, in that way. My name is Wade, okay? And the thing with this is that, I look for information, I mean, really after a baptism of June 14, 92, that had not at the time, years later, ultimately originated only here recently, after really, even more so, like, since the year 2020, since I really, like, put myself on YouTube.com, and my channel, way it is to be pretty, PRIDDY at YouTube.com, and all these other factors started taking place. But in 2022, it kind of like been kind of like a reminder of a laser that, I'm not referring to like lasers like you're seeing now. I mean, there's lasers and there's lasers. There are different types of lasers. Mine is really about special effects lighting for like music video. And that's what you're looking at and seeing like on me now, and like in this tent right here. And like what you see like me on as using my drums with that lighting. That's on my channel, Wade SV, pretty PRDDY. Sometimes with the fog, not all the time with the fog, but yeah, not limited to moving heads and strobes and other types of special effects. Not limited to what you see right now. It's like, yeah, it's like really cool, I think, anyway. But anyway, and I'm kind of wondering, if that's really the thing about NASA and the Air Force, Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, or if there's like any more to think about, like of rockets and VSAT communications, which ultimately gets to NASA anyway, and Lockheed Martin, and like Northrop Grumman. It's almost like the Lexus LFSA being the thought of like Mercedes-Benz introducing the Smart for Two car, and the LF and SA being the Smart for Two. But that is the one car, that the only one that I know of, that from like, 1995 to this day, in January 2026, is like an extremely, I think it's like, seriously, like, real cool. It's the Lexus LFSA that is presented as 2015 Summit Meeting, but really in 1995, like, I was taken there and didn't remember hardly, anything about it. I wouldn't have remembered anything about it had it not been, um, involving like a repetition of like a screensaver. And I noticed that I'd seen it as sequencing like different screensavers, groupings of sequences of different screensavers. And I noticed that over like a 2 or 3 year period. That was even before my mother and father had passed away. But it was after they had passed away, um, that I'd realized that I was actually taken to Europe's most wealthiest museum. And the only thing I really remember about it is about the hallway. And I was kind of like wondering, I'd said this before, I'm kind of like wondering if that's like the thing about, Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze, the Hall of Souls. So much of these, there's like several movies of practical application of like analytical and symbolic and alphanumeric and linguistic and practical application of like even the match and identify. Um, I'm looking right at it and I'm realizing something, quite a bit about the information. Okay, but the thing with it is that I'm kind of like thinking, is that one Sunday, Bono, the lead singer for U2, Sunday Bloody Sunday. I'm almost thinking now that it's that Marmalade sky that Elton John's singing about. The entire sky. If it's like the sky was like man-made orange, and that's like representing some idea of I don't know if it would be considered a UN sanction or a martial law or North American Free Trade Act as North Atlantic Peace Treaties Organization. But somewhere in my mind, it seemed to be that one weekend would have had to been, if it's anything about maybe the thought of maybe controlling my arteries and blood flow. I'd realized something about that because here recently my blood vessels on my arm, are like really starting to stand. And I noticed like several factors that really, I noticed, even the thought now is kind of, it seemed to be the thing about maybe even the content of the lyrics and involving, something about the pituitary gland and accessing, what is actually main arteries. Likewise, in addition, that would have had to been the one weekend, if any at all, about maybe the Surgeon General and the Stargate and like an actual operation taking place in my parents' home, was at the time that I went to sleep in my brother's room at the time, and realizing something about like something that actually affects like a guy where it matters in relation, and and not limited to being affected in that area, but it seemed to be like even the thought of maybe controlling an overproduction of white blood cells. That seemed to be a factor that an accumulation that would maybe present restriction in circulation, um, affecting that likewise in addition. And, it's kind of like thinking about that and not limited to, and once again, it's like the Alaskan pipeline and, it's really not the humor, but are you trying to control my erection? And it seemed to be, the thing about that movie, Weird Science, and the question, okay, will a penny fall faster than a feather in a vacuum tube? That's like two tubes, and that's in a guy's, where it matters in relation, okay, of consensual participation that normally identifies, compatibility between like a man and a woman, okay, or what would be considered, thought of like marital, participating factors of consensual participation, or like in corporate law, it'd be like ventures and mergers and like, really important to exporting, okay. But in any case, yeah. So like, I was kind of like thinking about that with that one movie. And the Alaskan pipeline, for real, there's like two tubes, and the guys, think about, hey, it's not that it has to be Pontiac consignment, but hey, wow, it's like really good scenery, Uh, the thing of it is, it's like, really, and it seemed that all that information seemed to be whether or not if a deed restriction had been something of that, and that Marmalade sky presenting the orange, and where that actually took place while I was going through a circuit. I mean, beginning like in like really 19 December of 93, 94 and 95, but really a 10-year circuit lasting more than 16 years. With the in and out thing about it. The thing it is that I mean, if that was like some idea of a deed restriction, somewhere in my mind, I'm thinking that pro bono presenting the factors of like the similarities of a benefit of like supplemental security income is where I'm at with all the information. Studying linguistic and alphanumerics have led to, I mean, everything about what available information has been. And maybe during my lifetime, didn't have the time, didn't think about it, didn't know anything about alphanumerics or linguistics, other than, when I started studying alphanumerics, I didn't even think of linguistics. Um, and when I thought of linguistics, combining the study of language with alphanumerics, it's kind of like, oh, well, I thought I already studied English, and I thought already, like, it's English and alphanumeric anyway. But I mean, really, at a different level, even the Boolean charts seem to be thinking about 6 in audio production of like the principles of digital audio. The Boolean chart presents the symbolic representation as Stargate. I mean, it doesn't identify it as Stargate, but it's symbolic, and it is of Stargate. And the thing of it is that it sequences characterization in sets of 6. And the alphanumerics of 6 is 52 in a VPN device president network or virtual personal network, or even the thought of the heartbeat of America and heart and pearl, and off the alphanumerics of 52 plural being with an S being 19 and 52 being 71 like Pearland. And all that information, I mean, it seemed to be identifying factors of like the stream, the Pearl Calamity Jane, the prepaid postage, the Mississippi, all that information that seemed to be leading to what seemed to be Trump saying, "Make America Great Again." And it seemed to be that thing about the Marmalade sky. I mean, it's like a phenomenally huge secret, and I'm thinking that would have to be because, I mean, I went to sleep on a Friday, okay? And I woke up thinking it was only going to be 2 hours later, the same day, and realized that it was like Sunday, and the whole weekend had virtually passed by. And when I woke up, I mean, the sky was so orange. I mean, it was like bleeding. It was like desaturating. It was so bright and intensely orange that it was like going through the curtains and making my room orange. Actually, my brother's room. But I was in there, and the only thing really I remember about that was being maybe the thought of maybe not really disoriented, but maybe so, but losing place of time is thinking that it was like only 2 hours later and discovering and kind of being a little confused about a displacement of time. Like, are you kidding me? I need to quit saying, "Are you kidding me?" But anyway, yeah. So like I'm like 61 years of age. Okay, I know it might sound like Babylon and 71 in Pearland. Okay, but I'm not really trying to like sound like that really at all. I'm 61 years of age now. Okay. And I'm actually thinking that really that possibly that might be the thought of maybe how human capital is identifying, like where's human capital in your method of banking, or the thought of maybe using a deed restriction as lifespan of like lifespan of Defacto, and it seemed to be really exactly that. And the Marmalade sky. I mean, if that's the Marmalade sky, I mean, if that's some idea of like martial law, or the Coast Guard is the front lines of the beach run, or international financial management of sand software, well then it is. I mean, it seemed to be. I mean, all that information seemed to be really exactly that. Yet the color of what's inside of like county likewise in addition, it's the tang, it's the drink of the astronauts and cosmonauts, right? But anyway, it's kind of like the sky was like so orange. It seemed to be. I mean, if that's like martial law, I mean, if it's martial law, if it's not martial law, well then, what does that orange Marmalade sky mean? I mean, EltonJohn singing about it seemed to be other information leading to like a Bryan Adams music video. Oh, like Follow the Girl with Kaleidoscope Eyes, and I mean, and it looks like East Beach in Galveston. Yet it seemed to be somewhere in my mind it would be something of the Sea of Galilee in the Israel area. Yeah, yes, it's almost like a Blondie song. The tide is high. It's like the horizon of the water. What would like be normally the thought of maybe a position of the camera in the horizon of like a lake or like the ocean, and the top portion of it being like switched out with like other locations. Yet the same at the bottom, but it seems to me that certain scene of Brian Adams was seen to be like at a beachfront, like in Istanbul, Turkey. Looks like East Beach in Galveston. And I'm assuming, based on all the information I've been studying, that would maybe include the Sea of Galilee. And the thing about one band seemed to be the seventh power, and certain informations, and even involving, the coupon laser closure corrective eye surgery, that have been like showing and referencing the thought of like follow the girl with the kaleidoscope eyes. I mean, all this information is happening, and that's the one that really is kind of like a seemed to be all this information. It seemed to be, I mean, really kind of like really, I mean, it's. But anyway, yeah. So like I've been thinking about that because um and all that information. But yeah, I want to include that because it's already going on. 55 minutes and like 49 seconds. So you know what? I think I'm kind of going to go ahead and take a break. But yeah, I want to include that because I'm kind of like really, I'm really wanting to hear maybe what maybe someone has to say of NASA and the Air Force and maybe the President of the United States about Make America Great Again. And if that's the real deal about 1972 and the Elton John song Lucy in the Sky of Diamonds, if that Marmalade Sky represents the Coast Guard as the front lines of the beach of international financial management, or the carbon footprints absentee voting as a mechanics lien of trading energy as the North American Free Trade Act and North Atlantic Peace Treaties Organization, using a deed restriction as the lifespan of Defacto, between like NAFTA and like NATO. Yeah, so like, yeah, so yeah, I'd like to hear something about that. If that's really what that Marmalade Sky really is, the Coast Guard presenting the idea of like international financial management of SAN software, of storage area networks, and securities and annuities of like multi-international banking systems as a vice president network. Yeah, so like there it is. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and take a break now. Okay, there it is. All right.